The teacher everyone loved tried to touch me. My best friend stopped him. The school punished her instead. I was a sophomore when Maya came back to school after disappearing for the first 4 months of the year. She had been the kind of girl everyone noticed before. Confident, kind, effortlessly smart. When she walked into class that morning, the room went silent in a way that felt heavy, not respectful. Then someone yelled it. "There's the girl who got knocked up and ruined her life." Laughter exploded like it had been waiting for permission. Maya sat down without saying a word. Her shoulders were straight. Her eyes stayed forward. I watched people stare like she was something broken they were allowed to mock. At lunch, she sat alone while kids threw crumpled paper at her table. I stood up to go sit with her, but my friend grabbed my arm and shoved a balled-up worksheet into my hand. "Don't feel bad. She baby-trapped her boyfriend. He was supposed to go D1. Now he's changing diapers." I didn't believe it, but I stayed in my seat anyway. For weeks, I watched Maya get erased. Teachers who used to praise her intelligence spoke to her like she was a disappointment. Questions she asked were met with sarcasm. During a health presentation about intimacy, the instructor stared at her the entire time like she was a warning sign. The students were worse. Girls who used to copy her outfits whispered slurs when she walked past. Her friends dropped her overnight. Her social media vanished within 2 weeks. But the strange thing was that Maya never turned cruel. I saw her tutoring special needs kids after school. I saw her slip lunch money to a freshman who forgot his. She kept tampons in her backpack for anyone who needed one. No one thanked her. They took what they needed and went back to pretending she did not exist. Everything changed the day I skipped fifth period. My mom had been drinking again the night before, and I needed air to stop my hands from shaking. I went behind the gym where there were no cameras and lit a cigarette. Halfway through, I heard footsteps. Mr. Caldwell appeared around the corner. My geometry teacher. Everyone loved him. Girls giggled at his jokes. He asked if I was having a rough day and stepped closer. I asked him not to tell anyone I was smoking. He said he wouldn't. Then he said he could help me relax. Before I understood what was happening, my back hit the wall. His hand slid down my arm. I froze completely. My cigarette fell to the ground, back away from her. Maya stood there with pepper spray pointed directly at his face. Do you think people change how they treat girls after rumors spread? By the second week after my diagnosis, the house felt smaller, like the walls were listening and judging how brave I was pretending to be. Every morning I woke up already tired. Not the sleepy kind, but the deep bone tired that made brushing my hair feel like a chore I could fail. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to stay normal, because if I broke down, everything else would collapse with me. I told myself love would show up quietly, not loudly. At first, he checked in with messages that sounded right but felt empty. "Hope you are okay today. Let me know if you need anything." Words that floated and never landed. He stopped coming over unless I asked. When I did ask, he looked distracted like his body was there, but his mind was somewhere safer. I noticed how often he checked his phone, how quickly he pulled away when I leaned in. I noticed everything because sickness sharpens your senses in cruel ways. Appointments became my new calendar. White rooms, beeping machines, nurses with kind eyes. I learned how to nod while my chest screamed. I learned how to swallow fear without water. I stopped telling him details because every detail made him quieter. Silence started stretching between us like a long, dark hallway. I told myself he was scared too. I made excuses for him before he ever had to. Then the money lie slipped out of my mouth on a night when I felt invisible. It was not planned. It was not clever. It was desperation wearing a smile. I said a distant relative had left me something big, life-changing, enough to breathe again. The shift was immediate. His eyes changed. His voice softened. He came over the next day with groceries and concern, and hands that suddenly remembered how to touch me. That was when the truth hurt the most. Not the disease, not the treatments. The way love showed up only when it was profitable. He started calling himself my caretaker, told people he was being strong for me. My family praised him. I watched the performance like I was sitting in the audience of my own life. I felt sick in a different way. So I tested him. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know. I told him the doctors were worried again, that something was back. Worse, his face fell not with fear for me, but with fear for himself. He stepped back emotionally immediately, said he needed space to process. That night, my mother almost called him because she could hear me crying through the walls. That was when I knew. Love should not disappear when things get hard. Love should not need incentives. I stopped pretending after that. I started watching carefully, and I started planning how to tell the truth in a way that would finally protect me. Have you ever noticed someone change when money entered the picture? After that night, something inside me hardened quietly. Not into anger yet, but into clarity. I stopped seeing him as the man I loved and started seeing him as he really was, someone choosing comfort over character every single time. It hurt, but it also woke me up. I began keeping mental notes. The way he only showed up when others were watching. The way his kindness increased around my family and vanished when it was just us. My treatment started soon after. Long days that blurred together under fluorescent lights. I sat in waiting rooms surrounded by strangers who somehow felt closer than the man who claimed to love me. They asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. He dropped me off once and said he had errands to run. He did not come back until hours later. I did not ask where he went. I already knew it was anywhere but here. At home, my mom hovered in the way mothers do when they are scared, but trying not to show it. She cooked my favorite meals. She brushed my hair when my arms felt too heavy. She watched him closely without saying a word. One evening, she asked softly if he was being supportive. I said yes because admitting the truth out loud felt like another diagnosis I was not ready to accept. The inheritance lie kept growing legs. He talked about future plans now, vacations, investments, a bigger place. Always we, not me. Always later, not now. He talked more about money than my health. I smiled and nodded and felt myself slowly stepping outside the relationship emotionally, like leaving a room before the argument starts. I began recording things quietly. Messages, missed calls, moments when he vanished after bad news. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed proof for myself. I needed to know I was not imagining it. Gaslighting yourself is easy when you are sick and scared and tired. Evidence became my anchor. Then came the family dinner, the one where everyone praised him for standing by me. He squeezed my hand and told a story about how strong I was. My uncle raised a glass to him. I felt something snap. Not loudly, just enough to change everything. I realized I did not want to protect his image anymore. That night, I told him I wanted to be honest with everyone soon. About the money. About everything. His panic was instant. He asked why now, said it was unnecessary stress, said we should wait. His concern was not for my health, but for his role in the story. That was the moment I stopped loving him completely. I cried alone in the bathroom later, staring at my reflection, wondering how someone could abandon you without actually leaving. I promised myself one thing through the tears. I would not let this chapter end with me shrinking. If I was going to be sick, I was going to be brave too. And I started planning exactly how to reclaim my voice. Have you ever realized the truth about someone slowly rather than all at once? The days after that felt like walking on glass while pretending it was carpet. I moved carefully. I spoke gently. I watched everything. He sensed the shift in me but did not understand it. He thought I was fragile. He thought silence meant weakness. He did not realize I was gathering strength in the quiet. I scheduled another appointment and told him I needed him there. He hesitated before agreeing, and that hesitation said more than any argument ever could. In the car, he talked about traffic and work and anything except why we were really there. In the waiting room, he scrolled on his phone while I filled out forms with shaking hands. When the nurse called my name, he stood up late like he had to be reminded of his role. The doctor spoke carefully, used words that hovered between hope and warning. I watched his face instead of listening. He nodded at the wrong moments, asked about recovery time, not about how I was feeling. When the appointment ended, he said we would talk later. Later never came. It never did anymore. That evening, I told my mother the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. I said I felt alone even when he was in the room. Her eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for weeks. She did not say I told you so. She just hugged me like she was trying to glue me back together. That hug gave me more comfort than he had in months. I decided then how it would end. Not with yelling, not with drama, with honesty in the open where he could not twist it. I told my family I wanted everyone together soon. A simple dinner. Nothing suspicious. He was nervous but tried to hide it behind charm. He brought flowers. He practiced his caring boyfriend voice. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. Not from fear, but from anticipation. I replayed conversations in my head. I reminded myself why I was doing this. Not to punish him, but to free myself. I deserved truth around me, not performances. During treatment the next day, a woman sat beside me and said something that stuck. You learn who people are when they think nothing is left to gain. I nodded, like I understood everything suddenly. When I got home, I looked at him and felt calm for the first time in weeks. I was ready. Do you believe silence can be a form of strength? The dinner night arrived quietly, like it was trying not to scare anyone. The house smelled like food and familiarity, and all the things that usually meant safety. My family filled the living room with laughter and small talk, and concern wrapped in normalcy. He played his part perfectly, helping in the kitchen, complimenting my mom, sitting close to me with his hand resting where everyone could see it. I felt detached from my body like I was watching myself from above, calm in a way that surprised me. My heart was steady. My voice was ready. When everyone sat down, I waited. I let the conversation flow. I let him talk about how hard things had been, how strong I was, how lucky we were to have each other. Every word dug the truth deeper. Then I spoke. I said there was something I needed to clear up before we ate. My voice did not shake. The room went quiet. I looked at him first. I watched the confusion flicker across his face, then the fear. I told them about the inheritance, or rather the lie. I said there was no money, no miracle safety net, just me and my diagnosis and the people who showed up anyway. The silence that followed was heavy. My aunt gasped. My mom covered her mouth. He stared at me like I had pushed him off a cliff. I continued before he could interrupt. I said I had watched him pull away when I got sick. I said I saw how quickly he came back when he thought there was something to gain. I said love should not need a reward. He tried to speak, stumbled over explanations, said he was scared, said he did not know how to handle it, said the money had nothing to do with it. No one believed him, not because he was lying in that moment, but because his actions had already told the truth for him. My uncle asked him directly why he disappeared after appointments. My cousin mentioned the missed calls. My mother finally spoke and said she had been watching too. He shrank in his chair. Not angry, just exposed. I did not feel triumph. I felt release, like I had been holding my breath for months and finally let it out. I told him I needed honesty, not half love, that I was done begging someone to stay. I thanked him for the good moments and asked him to leave. He did. After the door closed, my legs gave out and I sat on the floor. My family surrounded me, hands on my shoulders, voices telling me I was brave. I did not feel brave. I felt empty and full at the same time, grief and relief sharing space. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since my diagnosis. Not because everything was okay, but because everything was finally true. Do you think public truth-telling was the right choice? The morning after the dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world had taken a step back to let me breathe. There were no messages from him, no apologies, no explanations, just silence. And for once, it did not feel heavy. It felt clean. I made tea and sat by the window, watching sunlight touch things without asking permission. I realized how long it had been since I noticed small moments like that. Words spread through the family quickly but gently. No gossip, just understanding. My phone filled with messages that were not dramatic, just steady. We are here. You are not alone. Let us know what you need. Support sounds different when it is real. It does not rush. It does not demand gratitude. It just exists. Treatment days continued. They were still hard. I still felt sick. I still cried sometimes for no reason at all, but something had shifted. I was not carrying the extra weight of pretending anymore. Nurses noticed the change. One of them said I seemed lighter even on my bad days. I smiled because it was true. I stopped checking my phone hoping he would reach out. I stopped replaying old conversations. When memories came, I let them pass like clouds instead of storms. Healing was not just about my body anymore. It was about unlearning what I had accepted as love. One afternoon, my mother and I sat together folding laundry. She told me she was proud of me in a way that felt different from before. Not protective, respectful. Like she saw me as strong even when I was scared. That mattered more than she knew. I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, fears, small victories. I wrote about how sickness strips you down to your core and how some people cannot handle seeing that. I wrote about how love should show up even when it is inconvenient, especially then. There were moments of loneliness. I would be lying if I said there were not. Nights when the house felt too quiet, when I missed the version of him I thought I knew. But I did not miss the way I felt with him at the end. That feeling was gone, and I was determined not to invite it back. I learned something important in those weeks. Closure does not come from apologies. It comes from choosing yourself when it is hardest. I had done that, and even though the road ahead was still uncertain, I felt grounded in a way I never had before. I did not know how the story would end, but for the first time, I knew it would be mine. Have you ever felt peace after a painful ending? As weeks passed, I began to notice how much energy I had been spending trying to hold someone together who did not want to stand on his own. Without that burden, my days felt longer in a good way. I paced myself. I listened to my body instead of pushing through pain just to seem strong. Strength started to look different to me. It looked like rest. It looked like asking for help without apology. Friends I had not spoken to in years reached out. Some had heard what happened. Some just sensed I needed connection. They did not tiptoe around me. They talked about normal things, work, life, silly memories. That normalcy healed something inside me. I realized how isolated I had become without noticing. During one appointment, a doctor said my response to treatment was better than expected. I did not celebrate wildly. I just smiled and breathed it in. Hope felt fragile but real. I carried it carefully like a glass object. I knew it could crack, but I also knew it was worth holding. I ran into him once at the grocery store, by accident. He looked smaller somehow, tired. He asked how I was doing. I said I was okay, and I meant it. There was no rush of emotion, no urge to explain or forgive or reopen anything. We spoke for less than a minute. When I walked away, my hands were steady. That was how I knew I had moved on. I spent more time with my family. Movie nights, slow dinners, quiet conversations. They never made me feel like a burden. They let me be sick without making me feel broken. That distinction mattered more than they realized. One evening, I sat outside watching the sky change colors and thought about the version of me from before the diagnosis, the one who believed love would always look the way she imagined. I felt tenderness toward her. She did not know what was coming, but she also did not know how strong she would become. I stopped measuring my worth by who stayed. I started measuring it by how I treated myself when no one was watching. That changed everything. There were still hard days, days when fear crept in quietly. But now I faced it with honesty, not denial. I had learned that pretending costs more than telling the truth. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I found something unexpected. Peace. Not loud, not permanent, but present. Enough to keep going. Do you think strength can look like softness? By the time autumn arrived, I realized I was no longer counting days by treatments alone. I was counting them by moments that made me feel alive. Morning light through the curtains, the taste of warm soup, laughter that came easily instead of being forced. Life had quietly stepped back in. I volunteered a few hours a week at the hospital. Nothing demanding, just sitting with patients who needed company. I listened more than I talked. Sometimes that was enough. I understood the fear in their eyes, the waiting, the unspoken questions. Being there for them felt like honoring my own journey. One afternoon, a woman younger than me asked how I stayed so calm. I told her the truth. I said I stopped wasting energy on people who could not meet me where I was. She nodded, like she had been waiting to hear that. In that moment, I realized how shared pain can become shared strength. I thought about love differently now. Not as something that rescues you, but something that stands beside you. I did not rush to replace what I lost. I was learning how to be whole on my own. That felt radical and right. My body still carried scars. My mind still had echoes of fear, but they did not define me. They reminded me that I had survived something that could have broken me. Instead, it clarified me. I found myself dreaming again. Small dreams, traveling someday, writing more, helping others navigate hard truths. These dreams did not depend on anyone else staying. They belonged to me. Sometimes at night, I replayed the dinner in my head, not with regret, but with gratitude. That moment changed the trajectory of my life. It showed me I could choose honesty even when it cost me comfort. I learned that love given under conditions is not love at all. It is a transaction. And I was done paying for affection with silence. As the leaves fell outside my window, I felt ready for whatever came next. Not fearless, just honest. And that was enough. Have you ever found purpose through pain? Winter came slowly and then all at once. Cold mornings, long nights, a quiet that settled deep. I wrapped myself in sweaters and patience. Treatment was nearing its final phase, and every appointment felt heavier and lighter at the same time, closer to an ending, whatever that ending would be. The doctor spoke with cautious optimism. Words like stable and responding floated through the room. I held onto them gently. I had learned not to demand certainty from life, only honesty. That lesson stayed with me. I spent more time alone without feeling lonely. I learned my own rhythms, when to rest, when to push, when to sit with difficult thoughts instead of running from them. Solitude became a companion rather than a punishment. One evening, my mother and I decorated the house with simple lights. Nothing fancy, just enough to make the dark feel softer. She looked at me and said she admired how I handled everything. I laughed because I did not always feel strong, but I understood what she meant. Strength was choosing not to harden. I received a message from him during that time. A long one. Apologies, explanations, regret. I read it once, then again. Then I put my phone down. I did not reply, not out of anger, out of closure. Some conversations end even if the other person is not ready. That night, I wrote in my journal about forgiveness. I realized forgiveness did not mean reopening a door. It meant not carrying the weight of resentment forward. I wished him well quietly and let go. As the year closed, I reflected on everything that had changed. My body, my relationships, my expectations. I had lost a version of my life I thought was guaranteed. In return, I gained myself. I did not know what the next year would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again confuse consistency with love, or sacrifice my truth to keep someone comfortable. The snow outside melted slowly, and with it something inside me softened. I was still here, still standing, still choosing myself. Do you believe forgiveness can be silent? Spring arrived without asking if I was ready. It never does. One day the air felt lighter and the trees decided to try again. I stood outside longer than usual, letting the warmth touch my skin like a quiet promise. My final treatment was scheduled. Not an ending exactly, but a pause, a breath between chapters. On that last day, I walked into the hospital with my head high, my mother beside me. No performances, no false heroes, just presence. The nurses clapped softly when it was done. Someone rang a bell down the hall. I did not cry. I smiled, deeply, fully, like my body finally believed me. Recovery was slow, honest. Some days I felt strong, some days I felt fragile. Both were allowed. I stopped apologizing for my limits. I stopped explaining myself. People who mattered understood without asking. I went back and reread everything I had written over the months. The fear, the anger, the clarity. I saw my transformation laid out in my own words. I was no longer the girl who begged love to stay. I was the woman who chose truth even when it hurt. I thought about him one last time, not with pain, but with understanding. He showed me exactly what I needed to learn, what I would never accept again. That was enough. Life did not suddenly become perfect, but it became real. I laughed more freely. I trusted my instincts. I noticed red flags without painting them green. I loved myself with a patience I had never offered before. If there is one thing this journey taught me, it is this. Illness does not just reveal who will leave, it reveals who you are when everything else falls away. And who I found was someone worth protecting. I am still healing, always will be in some way, but I am alive. I am honest. I am surrounded by love that does not need proof or profit. And that is how this story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with a woman standing in her truth, choosing herself every single day. What did this story make you reflect on about love?